On this episode of Repair Geek, something a little different. I show you how to convert your portable generator to natural gas or propane. So I'm going to be converting my Ridgid 7,000 watt portable generator over to natural gas. Reason being, in the event of a long power outage, I'll never have to go get gas. All I'll have to do is hook the generator itself up to my natural gas line and it will run indefinitely. Anybody that's in like a hurricane area or an area that's susceptible to a lot of tornadoes kind of knows what I'm talking about. If the power goes out in a widespread area, chances are where you go to get gas it also is not going to have power, and if they do, there's going to be a very long line of people waiting to get gasoline for their portable generators. So I'm trying to be a little bit proactive here. The whole reason I'm doing this is I have a well, so if the power goes out for a couple days, I don't have any water, so I can't flush the toilet, and after a couple of days, you can see how that would be an issue. Other reasons why you do this: it's also cheaper to run than gasoline, especially at today's natural gas prices compared to what they were, 8 or 10 years ago. I know it's kind of a minor point, but it's something worth considering. I doubt I'll ever make my money back from what I spent on this kit, but it's nice to know that it's not going to cost me as much as gasoline. Also, on a side note, it is much cleaner than gasoline. The hydrocarbon emissions are much lower, so if you like to be kind to the environment, maybe this is the way you should go. I'm going to bring you guys over and show you what exactly I bought, and I'll show you how to get it installed. Alright, so over here on the left is basically what you get in any sort of natural gas or propane conversion kit. It comes with some sort of governor regulator. This one is made by Garrettston. It is a model KN. A carburetor spacer, carburetor stud extensions, and this one has a street elbow that's been modified to accept a bolt in the top, which then connects to this hose, which is a 3/8 LP hose, and connects to the bottom of the carburetor spacer. So this stuff here on the right is what I sourced myself. This is a rubber LP hose with 1/2-inch NPT fittings on both ends. Those are going to accept these quick connects. That one is going to go on the house and the other one is going to go on the generator. So in the event that the power goes out, I simply connect those up like so, fire up the generator, and I'm done. I don't have to break out a crescent wrench and manually connect it to the house. I will say this: the hose and the fittings, I have almost as much invested in the hose and the fittings as what I do this conversion kit. I got the conversion kit for $125, and I want to say the hose was $60. These were around $35 a piece, and I believe these were around $10 a piece. So it's not cheap to do it this way. There's no reason you can't hook this directly to your natural gas line on your house. It's just not nearly as convenient. The final two things that I have here is this is an LED light mount for a quad. And the reason I'm using this is I'm going to use this to mount my regulator. A lot of people will drill holes in their frame and run a nut and bolt through it and hold it that way. I think this looks a little bit more professional, and if I never need to take it off the generator, my generator doesn't look like Swiss cheese. These back here are spacers, and what I'm going to use these for is I'm going to raise the engine, or maybe in your case you may need to move the engine. The reason I say that is because when you put this spacer between the carburetor and the airbox, it moves the airbox out. So that may start to contact the frame, and if you move the motor back in the chassis, it may give you enough clearance that you don't have to cut the frame. A lot of these kits want you to break out a Sawzall and cut the frame. I have enough room that I can simply raise the motor up a little bit. I'll be able to clear the frame, and I won't have to break out a Sawzall. If you have the option, try to modify your motor mounts or move your engine around as much as you can to try and get this spacer in there without having to cut the frame. I understand if you're working on an inverter generator, you may not be that lucky, you may not have that much space to work with, but it's something worth considering. As you guys can see, I've got my spacers installed over top my engine mounts. So I have a ton of clearance down here on the far end for my airbox, so I don't need to cut the frame or do anything crazy like that. So I'm going to go ahead and pull the airbox off and go ahead and get the spacer installed. Alright, so for the airbox, I got 2 clips here. The lid comes off. Pull your filter out. And I've got 5 bolts in here, 4 8mm and 1 10. And I've got that off. I've got 2 10mm bolts here holding the intersection of the airbox to the carburetor. My PCV hose attaches in the back here. I already pulled it loose, and that just pulls straight out like that. And then you're going to go ahead and take your spacer, and it is marked which side goes toward the carburetor. So that is going to sit, it's going to sit just something like that. But before we get there, we got to put 2 stud extensions on the carburetor. So as I was going to install this, I seated the spacer against the carburetor and went to put the airbox back on. And if you look by my pinky there is actually a gap between the airbox and the spacer itself. So you're possibly letting unfiltered air into the engine. This kit was specifically designed for a Honda GX390, which this is, and obviously they didn't take into account the style of airbox that I have. So my solution to this is I made a aluminum spacer, which then sits on top. So when I put the whole thing together, I have plenty of room. So this spacer issue kind of creates another issue for me, and that is the stud extensions. Because I added this 1/4-inch piece of aluminum, my stud extensions are no longer long enough to be able to bolt the airbox on. My solution to that is I picked up some metric bolts, the same thread pitch as the stud extension. I'm going to cut the head off the bolt and use that as my stud extension. Just so you guys can see, there is the spacer and my spacer mounted. Everything's secure, not going anywhere. So we're going to go ahead and get the regulator mounted. The T-fitting is going to go into the bottom. It's actually marked outlet on the regulator. I'm I'm going to use a little bit of thread sealant on the threads. They say in the instructions that you can mount the regulator in basically any direction as long as it's vertical. If you mount it flat, there's a diaphragm inside that might get pulled on by gravity and it may not work correctly. It may not shut off like it's supposed to. This thing is actually designed, if the engine stalls out, it will stop all gas flow so you don't just start dumping a bunch of natural gas or propane outside your house. The hose, they only supply one hose clamp for, and it goes on this end. The end that goes on the carburetor adapter doesn't require one. They don't provide it. You can put one there if it makes you feel a little better. But according to Nash Fuel, it is not necessary on this kit. Just to give you guys an idea of what everything looks like once it's been installed, this is what you're going to have. Well, at least in my case. The only thing I do not have connected is there's a line right there going to the valve cover, going into the airbox. That's a crankcase vent. I need a longer tube to be able to connect that up. So to see if there's any performance reduction running on natural gas, I'm going to go ahead and run this thing on regular gasoline using probably my dryer or my air compressor and take it as close to 7,000 watts as I can. And I'm going to repeat the test once I get the natural gas kit installed. In case any of you guys are curious, I'm backfeeding my panel using an interlock kit in this outlet on the outside of my house. I can supply 30 amps of power anywhere in my house with this kit, so I can run a hot water tank if I'm out of power for multiple days. I can run my well pump, my oven, you name it, I can run it off of this. The only downside to doing this is I don't know when the power comes back on because my main breaker is turned off. So you kind of got to pay attention to your neighbors and see whether or not they actually have power. Alright, so as you guys can see, I am now running on generator power solely. The only breaker that I have on is this one here for the lights and this one here which feeds my dryer. I tried running the air compressor and the generator just doesn't have enough power to get it started. So I'm going to use the dryer. I'm going to do low, medium, and high, and hopefully you guys will be able to see what exactly, how much wattage that draws on each phase. That is the dryer on low. So to give you guys an idea, I'm going to do this test again once I'm on natural gas and see if I'm able to get the same amount of power out of this thing. If I push this thing any harder, I'm going to start losing frequency out of my generator, so my lights are going to start flickering and it's going to start doing weird stuff. You can kind of already see it's flickering a little bit here and there, so I'm going to go ahead and shut the dryer off and go ahead and do the conversion. Alright, now that everything is done on the generator, this is what I installed on the outside of my house. It is another quick connect fitting just like what I have on the generator that will accept the male end on the hose. So in the event that my power goes out, I come outside, wheel the generator outside, plug in there, hit the prime button, pull the cord, I'm off and running. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and hook this thing up to the wall or to the gas line and pull the cord, try and get it running. And then what I'm going to have to do is I'm going to have to dial in the air-fuel ratio using the bolt on the governor regulator. My generator has a Hertz readout, If yours does not, you need some sort of tachometer that needs to read 3600 for most generators, so you know you're getting 60 hertz out of your generator, which is what normal house current is in America. If you live overseas, it's probably 50 hertz depending on where you live. Alright, so now that it runs and I got it working, what I'm going to do is I'm going to hook it back up to the house just like I did earlier and turn the dryer on just like I did earlier, and we'll see whether or not this actually has any performance reduction on natural gas as opposed to gasoline. I've heard tale of it going both ways. You know, some people say that natural gas, it runs exactly the same, and other people say there is a noticeable reduction. So hopefully with the dryer running on this thing, we'll find out. All right, we're going to switch over to the generator here. All right, I'm going to run that over and turn the dryer on real quick, and we'll see what we get. Well, I will say this, it's definitely doing it, and it's much smoother than what it is on gasoline. I think being able to regulate the air-fuel ratio with this natural gas kit keeps it from surging under high load. So I think that's why the voltage, or the wattage I should say, is much more stable than what it was in the first test. But just so you guys know that I'm not screwing with you, she's laboring a little bit for sure. Alright guys, so what do I think? I'm kind of blown away personally. I did not expect this to run nearly as good as what it did on natural gas. Honestly, it blows away gasoline. It doesn't surge, it doesn't hesitate, it runs like it's supposed to run, basically. Even if I had to go back and adjust the air-fuel ratio on this, not a big deal because it's just a bolt in the bottom of the regulator. Whereas a carburetor, you'd have to change out jets. So I'm pretty happy with the kit, other than the fact that the adapter didn't fit. If I had to do it over again, I would have probably just bought a governor regulator myself and pieced together the kit and probably made my own carburetor adapter, simply because I probably would have saved some money. This kit was $125. It was probably one of the cheapest ones that I found online. There are quite a few other kits out there. This one I felt had the least amount of compromise to it, meaning if I ever wanted to go back to gasoline, the throat of the carburetor is completely open, so it's not going to be any restriction. My choke's going to work correctly. There's one kit in particular made by US Carburation called a motor snorkel kit, and it has a tube that runs through a gasket and then goes through basically into the carburetor. Well, if you're going to run the engine on gasoline and you need to use the choke, the tube going through the middle of the carburetor isn't going to let the choke plate closed, and you're going to have problems getting the engine started. So I went with this one because it was cheapest, and there was the carburetor bore was wide open. A couple other things you may need to know. If you're going to run this on natural gas, you need to size your natural gas line accordingly. I will put links down in the description to a couple charts that I used to figure out what size natural gas line that I needed to be able to run this thing at 7,000 watts and not have any issue. If you're going to run propane, because I didn't use propane, I didn't show this, but there is an additional regulator that you need to buy that goes on the propane tank. All it does is it regulates down the 300 psi of tank pressure down to about 5 psi for the governor regulator. Other than that, the kits are identical. Another side note on propane. A typical 20-pound gas grill propane tank is equal to about 5 gallons of gasoline if you guys are wanting to look at running on propane. So just to give you guys an idea of what the runtime might be, that's the best information that I found. I don't know personally, I haven't tried it. As always, guys, I thank you for watching. If you like the video, hit like. If you want to see more content, hit subscribe.